Hello, BookTube. The other day, Michael K Vaughan made a video all about his favorite superhero, Superman. He made a video showing his Superman collection, at least some of it. The paperbacks, the early graphic novels, the big hardcover omnibus editions that he loves so much, everything except the floppy comics. To show you a bit of his Superman collection, which of course will only grow over time, since DC Comics puts out a lot of this stuff. And shortly after that, Jim at Mystery and Mayhem did a video of his own along the same lines about Batman, showing you all some of his Batman collection, the stuff that he's accumulated about the Cape Crusader. And I thought, I saw those two videos and wanted to do one of my own because, as Jim says in his own video, BookTube is one of the only places he can think of where stealing an idea is not only not frowned upon, but actively encouraged. So I thought I would do a video not on Superman and not on Batman, but rather on the Legion of Superheroes. And for that, we need to go back not only to Adventure Comics number 247, but also, more importantly, to 1958. At which point, imagine yourself as your great-grandfather, riding your bike around, walking around endlessly in the American Midwest, which is where this Superboy lives. This is not the super gay Superboy. This is not the cloned Superboy. This is the adventures of Superman when he was a boy, when he was a teenager in Smallville in the American Midwest. If you were a boy back then, reading your funny books, not taking any care of them, biking all around, spending huge amounts of time with your dogs, and you were on the cusp of puberty in 1958, you would have been amazed by Adventure Comics number 247, because although that Superboy, that character, has all sorts of adventures, and he's loved by his adoptive parents, the Kents, and he goes to high school, and he's not entirely hated by his high school peers. He has boy and girl friends. He's only really understood by one other being in the world, his dog. His dog is also superpowered. His dog is also from Krypton. And his dog understands some of the things that he is going through, that his human friends and his human parents cannot possibly understand. As a writer much later on would put it, far, far later on, an entire generation after 1958, that dog is the only other one on Earth who understands what it feels like to fly through the air, or to feel a bullet bounce off living flesh. And then, with Adventure Comics 247, all of that changes. Because he meets three strange young people. They're teenagers like him, and he's never seen them before in Smallville, and they seem to know that Clark Kent and Superboy are the same person. And eventually, all is revealed. They are from the future. They are three superhero teenagers from the future, 1,000 years forward from Superboy's time. And they have created a club, what will later be called a Legion of Superheroes, who want to use time travel to induct Superboy into their ranks. He is, after all, the most famous super teen in history. They would like to have him as a member of their team. And so they come back in time to do that. They confuse him at first, but then they take him forward in time to their own future. This is Smallville, but look how big it is. Look at how computerized it is. Why, the person carrying around the paper and print snail mail is a robot. They have jetpacks to fly. Superboy can fly under his own power, of course. And they put him to a number of tests to see whether he qualifies for being part of their team. This is the modern iteration of that cover, where, as you can see, they're failing him. And he is astonished at that, because they do, in the course of their adventures, they do fail him. You see, there's a table with a number of teenage superheroes around them. This is their clubhouse. It turns out that Superboy's failing at those tests is a joke. They're razzing him. They made it look like he was the least effective person of them all, even though their superpowers are not like his. Although, crucially, those first three superheroes that Superboy meets, Lightning Lad, Cosmic Boy, and Saturn Girl, have powers that he doesn't have. Saturn Girl is a telepath. Cosmic Boy can manipulate metal. Magneto style, only before Magneto was created. And Lightning Lad can hurl lightning bolts from his fingers. They only have those powers. They don't have anything else. Superboy has a panoply of powers, but he seems to be bested by them until he realizes they reveal that they're just having him on. They're having some fun, and that they, of course, want him as part of their team. Now, the Legion of Superheroes was thought up by Otto Binder, and Otto Binder had 15 clever ideas before breakfast, and just kept generating them. If you look at the old run of Adventure Comics, number 247 doesn't right away stand out. Maybe the one that stands out the most is the introduction of a dog from Krypton into the canon, where suddenly there is more than one survivor of the planet Krypton, who isn't in the Phantom Zone. You wouldn't have maybe thought all that much about that issue. It would have been, oh my God, Superboy's blind in this issue. All these statues are coming to life in this issue. He seems to be transported back to the ancient world of Cleopatra in this issue. In this issue, he meets a future society of teenage superheroes. In this issue, there's a giant gorilla. In this issue, he and Superboy and Superdog trade brains. It would have been part of a progression. You wouldn't have thought much of it, unless you were right on the brink of becoming a teenager when you read it for the first time and realized that Superboy was now profoundly no longer alone. Far be it from me to say that Superdog is not good company, but there are some things that you need to talk about. There are some experiences that you need to bond over. A dog comes pre-bonded. It's not the same thing. It's wonderful, but it's not the same thing. And if you were in that position, and you suddenly realized, hey, wait a minute, in 1,000 years from now, there's a superhero team of teenagers? Tell us more about that. If that was true, if that hit you then, or if it hit you as many subsequent readers did had it hit them later, you'd want more of that. You'd want a lot more of that. You wouldn't get it right away. It takes time to change the heading of the Titanic, but you would flood the headquarters of Adventure Comics and DC Comics with your letters saying, please give us more of the Legion. Who are all these kids? What do they do in their own time? When Superboy's not around, what do they do in their own time? Or could you team them up with Superboy again? Please give us more of the Legion. Please give us more of the Legion. Please give us more of the Legion. And it didn't, like I said, it didn't happen right away, but eventually the powers that be at DC Comics realized that this fandom, this group of people, whether they were just on the cusp of teenhood or not, were more fanatical in their devotion to the concept of the Legion of Superheroes than any other fandom was to any other part of superhero comics. They were more loyal to the Legion than they were to Superboy himself. And so the Legion started to appear more often. So I think I could probably show you the progression if we just look at covers. Let's give that a try. I haven't actually tried this, but let's give that a try and see if I can show it to you. Show you what I'm talking about. Yes, okay. Here is Adventure Comics 247, and there is Superboy failing these tests. And don't worry about the coloring of the costumes, and that is not Saturn Queen, for instance, that is Saturn Girl, and Cosmic Boy didn't need a bubble over his head for very long, and Lightning Lad's costume is not orange and yellow, but there he is failing his tests. If we look at Adventure Comics after that, as we just keep going, it takes a bit of time before the Legion reappears. There are all sorts of other storylines. There's a team up with Robin. How could that be? Maybe it's not Dick Grayson. There's an issue where Superboy meets Hercules and Atlas, two other strongmen. There's an issue made famous by BookTube where Superboy is blind and needs his dog to be a super seeing eye dog. There are issues where girls fight over Superboy, etc., etc., and so on and so forth. And it takes a while. Here's one where Crypto the Superdog becomes enormous. It's breaking down the Kent's home. See? Otto Binder and his fellow writers like this, they could do this sort of thing all day long. It wasn't for a while until we get the return of the Legion. And every time the Legion appeared after that, their lore increased. after a while, actually, as long as we're here, let's zoom forward. After a while, the requests for more appearances from the Legion uh, were so numerous that the Legion started appearing in every issue of Adventure Comics. See, one after another, and then it became their own book. Eventually, it became their own book, where you weren't going to have Superboy in an adventure. You were going to have Superboy featuring the Legion of Superheroes. It was going to be a shared book. It wasn't going to be Superboy's own book anymore. And that transformed... these things are so convenient. That transformed into Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. A book actually called that. No more Adventure Comics anymore. Instead, it was Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. And as you can tell, maybe you can glimpse here, I'll show it to you in much greater detail, the Legion started to grow up. They grew out. It wasn't just the three characters anymore and a table full of anonymous people. It was dozens of characters, dozens of members of the team. But they also grew up. The Legion also grew up. They got older. They started to look for a brief while like teenagers. That didn't stay true for very long. At no point in their lifetime do they stay looking like teenagers. Mainly because one of the architectural artists of this whole thing was an artist named Kurt Swan, who really just drew teenagers as smaller, less defined adults. but Adventure Comics trundled along, and you got more and more Legion adventures. They became more and more dedicated to the Legion. And then took over, and then got a book with Superboy. Eventually, over time, the Legion started getting its own comic, and popping up everywhere else. It was a huge fan favorite. Whether or not there were ever sales numbers that explicitly showed that, it was a huge fan favorite, enough to tempt DC Comics to keep featuring the Legion of Superheroes, which meant that in very little time, starting in 1958, but certainly by 1970, there was a huge backlog of Legion appearances, and the powers at DC Comics learned that anytime you put the Legion forward, it would sell out. Anytime. Not true for Batman, not true for Superman, not true for Captain Marvel, not true for Superboy or Robin, but true for the Legion. If you put something out with the Legion in it, it will sell out. Even if, and this is crucial because this became very, very important, even if what you're putting out is just reprints of older Legion adventures. If you're coming to the Legion, this now hugely expanded world-building mythology of a gigantic team with personalities and backstories for every character, if you're coming to that in 1970, well, maybe you were the not-yet-born younger brother of the kid who founded in 1958. You're not going to have those issues because no one saved those issues. We didn't save the issues in 1958, 1959. We read them out in the sun, in a backfield, with your head resting on the belly of a big, sleeping, snoring, farting pig. And when you were done, you just left it there to get ground into the mud or eaten by the pigs. You didn't think you were going to take it home and save it. You didn't think you were... What, save it for what? Save it for when? Save it also for whom? There's no one else you knew cared about these things. Well, by 1970, that was less true. Comic books were more mainstream and had much more of a following. In 1970, if you became aware of the Legion, well, chances are that you wouldn't have much access to those earlier issues. You might want to see, what was the first time the Legion ever appeared? You might want to see classic earlier adventures that you're hearing described or referenced or having those older readers tell you about. The Legion War with Krypton, the Super Stalag of Space, but you don't have access to them. DC Comics, the powers that be, realized, well, if we reprint Legion comics, they'll sell. Even though we've already sold them, they'll still sell. So they started to do that. They gave us, for instance, these things. Great big collector's editions for $1 that had original material in it, like, for instance, this Mike Grell cover is original material. This cover had never been seen before. You can see Mike Grell is drawing the Legion specifically as adults. They might have happy, sunny smiles, but these are adult men and women. And also you would get an original spread on the inside here. This particular issue has a spread of the wedding of Duo Damsel and Bouncing Boy. A drawing by Dave Cockrum, who went on to fame as the artist for the X-Men. And you've got the gallery just full of people here, including Tars Tarkas from John Carter of Mars, and a whole bunch of other characters that are just stuck in here at random. You wouldn't get this in any Legion comic. You would have to buy this issue for the gigantic sum of $1 in order to get that. And you obviously would. DC made a couple of these things. But they also made these things. Little digests, the exact opposite in size from these things, tiny little things, these little square-bound digests where they revived the title of Adventure Comics and reprinted older comics. Now, there was a lot in here. There was Plastic Man, there was the Jim Aparo Aquaman, but there were also Legion issues at the beginning there, and every once in a while, I don't know if this one will actually do it, every once in a while you would get original Legion material in these square-bound adventure comics. Mine are up on way up on a top shelf, and I grabbed this one, and then I heard a voice in my head whisper, "You too are mortal," and I thought, if I stay up here to grab any more, I'm going to die. So I just have this one. This doesn't. It does have original stuff here in a Ross Andru cover, first of all, artist who went on to fame for drawing Spider-Man, and did a number of Legion covers, but I don't think did much in the way of Legion interior art. And this also has original artwork bordering here. These Adventure Comics square-bound digest things were a lot of fun, and there were quite a few of them. I believe they're all collectible now. I'm pretty sure they all are. And this just kept getting more so, because DC Comics realized that the original fanatical core group of Legionnaires was not dying off. They weren't aging out, and they weren't dying off. Somehow or other, they were still the most vocal, most fanatic fans of this comic book creation out there. More than anybody. That is still true. But we'll get to that at the end, because of course this video ends in tragedy. But we're not getting there yet. Instead, DC Comics realized, well, reprint culture just in general is booming because of the kids, those kids who were reading these things in 1958, 1959, and loving them and then leaving them in the dirt, they're now adults with disposable income. So we can really package their reprint culture. So before there were those huge hardcover omnibus editions that Michael K. Vaughan loves so much, there were these. There were DC Archive editions. And they realized, well, if we reprint the Legion, there you go. If we reprint everything from the Legion, everything from Superboy, everything from Jimmy Olsen, everything from Supergirl, everything from Adventure Comics, and we take our time and we do it right, and we reprint everything in the right order with new introductions, these things were expensive. This thing, yeah, this was $50 35 years ago. That was a huge amount of money to go to a comic shop, by then there were comic shops, and spend. But DC Comics launched Legion of Superheroes Archive Editions, Volume Number 1. They got the legendary Curt Swan to do a new cover, an original cover of Superboy and those three original people, the three original Legion members who recruited him into the club: Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad. Notice what I say? They have childish faces, but Curt Swan can't do anything but draw adult. And in fact, Curt Swan shares a quality in common with Mike Sikowski and Wayne Boring, is that not only can he not draw anything except adult bodies, but he also can't draw anything except adult male bodies. Him and Wayne Boring, and especially Mike Sikowski, they did their best to try to hide that fact, but nevertheless, I didn't entirely object. And these omnibus editions reprinted a handful of Legion appearances. So not necessarily just Zuzu poop, goo poop 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 poop. Not necessarily just the Legion appearances in Adventure Comics, but also if the Legion crossed over into Supergirl. Is Jim Mooney artwork, the best artwork Jim Mooney ever did was on Supergirl. They reprinted all of these. This first volume came out when? Will you tell me when this came out? 1991. 1991. That's a long time ago. And it sold out immediately. DC had done other archive editions, and they would go on to do other archive editions. Believe it or not, Black Hawk archive editions did not sell out immediately. Green Loser Arrow did not sell out immediately. Quite a few of these things did not sell out immediately. They sold a trickle to collectors, but the whole run didn't sell out, except for the Legion. The Legion Archive #1 did sell out. And not only that, but it sold out instantly. Pre-orders sold out instantly. So DC Comics decided, obviously, they made the correct decision to keep coming out with these. They came out with volume #2, another original Kurt Swan cover. Notice how much has changed. Our team has expanded enormously. In fact, this cover gives you a really good indication of the organic changes in the Legion from 1 to 2. Not only does 2 have far more characters on it, we still have Saturn Girl, we still have Lightning Lad, we still have Cosmic Boy, we have all these other people. Not only is that true, but also there's no Superboy. Superboy gradually gets elbowed out of the focus of his own team. And nobody really, Legion fans didn't really have an objection to that. Especially not with the introduction of really super characters. The foremost of which is not on this cover. But here we have just the same thing. An original introduction and more full-color reprints of Legion Adventures. Aside from the written introduction and sometimes the cover, there was no original content in these. Here we get the archive edition to the Legion #3. Again, no Superboy. We have Lightning Lad and we have Saturn Girl. We also have this guy, Mon-El, who is introduced in a Superboy adventure as Superboy's brother. Turns out he's not Superboy's brother. He's just an equally super being from a different planet. He becomes a member of the Legion of Superheroes, an absolutely inspired idea. It was not Otto Binder's idea to transplant Mon-El from Superboy lore to Legion lore. That was actually not his idea. It was the idea of someone else. But here he's on this cover, and we get more adventures, including whatever is an adjunct to the Legion. So Jimmy Olsen issues and all, and same as that. And we definitely want to go through all of these, don't we? Let's go to #4. I know if I do these out of order, some of you will have a conniption fit. This is Legion of Superheroes #4. I believe that is a very early Stuart Immonen cover. And you notice from this cover something that not only... You notice here that Supergirl is on the cover. Because in an odd detail of the Legion of Superheroes, they use their time bubble to go back in time to recruit Superboy. Superman, when he was a teenage boy. A young teenage boy. But they also use their time bubble to go back in time 2 years later to recruit Supergirl, when she's a teenager on Earth and Superboy has become Superman. So the Supergirl who they're recruiting is from Superboy's future. Always struck me as really weird to do. Why would you do that? You open up the door to time paradoxes galore. So if Supergirl and Superboy were ever to share an adventure with the Legion, how much could she not say? You are certainly going to live to be 30. Won't that change how Superboy acts in combat? You're going to find the love of your life, and I happen to know her name. I know where she lives. When you're a teenage boy, you can go and find her. It doesn't matter. Supergirl became instantly part of Legion lore. Then we have Legion of Superheroes #5, proving that even some of these omnibus, these archive editions, could have ugly covers. This one has an ugly cover. And a whole bunch of other Legion characters. There you see Lightning Lad has lost an arm. It's been replaced with a mechanical one. You see this character leaping out of the frame. That is Pharaoh Lad. You see this character eating the frame. That is Tensel Chem, Matter Eater Lad, whose superpower, believe it or not, his qualification for being on the Legion is that he can eat and digest anything. And we have absolutely classic stories in here. I resisted the urge when these were coming out. Is this still $50? Yeah. I resisted the urge when these were coming out to pinch pennies. It was an urge, $50 back in the 1990s, to go to a comic shop and spend $50 in addition to the floppy comics you were buying. That's a lot. But the temptation was to look at the back of these things and say, all right, well, some of these I want and some of them I don't. So I won't get this one. And I resisted that urge. Instead, I got every one of them. This one, of course, has absolutely classic stories. So I wasn't in any doubt on this one, but I ended up getting them all. I don't think I ever did that because I was suspecting that they would become collectible, and I don't actually know how collectible these things are. If you were to get a whole run of them on eBay, the whole set of the hardcovers, I don't know how much that would cost you. Probably a lot more than $50 a piece. Here we have volume number 6. There was Superboy again. We have a whole bunch of other Legion characters. And then number 7, which I have to assume is the most collectible of these archive editions, because it has an original cover by Frank Miller, who went on to fame for Batman Dark Knight Returns. This is, I believe, the only time that he has ever drawn the Legion of Superheroes, and certainly this was the first time that he did it for a publication. And there we have his classic style. You'll notice that he goes his own way in terms of what you want to do on this cover. Notice that character in purple. There are 3 of her. That's Triplicate Girl. Whereas on the earlier cover, there are only 2 of her. And on the cover before that, there are only 2 of her. That is accurate, but Frank Miller doesn't care. And what are you going to do? You're going to tell him that he's drawing lore inaccurate cover. Here we have Superboy and Mon-El. And this shows you what it's reprinting, which is from the heyday of Adventure Comics. Although there were lots of other things too. It wasn't only these things that were in every issue. That is number 7. Move on to number 8. Fairly ugly cover, but original, that had never existed before. I think that these archive editions, if I remember correctly, they do finish out by removing the original covers and just reprinting panels from older issues. Look at that. 4 Legionnaires stranded in time, fleeing from Mordru the Merciless. Oh my, how wonderful. Let's see here. That was number 8. Let's do number 9. There we go. Another ugly cover. Then number 10. Look at that, huh? That is a cover by Dave Cockrum. The aforementioned Dave Cockrum, the artist for the X-Men, only here he is doing the Legion in all their glory. And you can see what I mean. They stop being children. They have an infamous 1970s costume redesign and start looking very adult. They start looking very adult. In the comics, they are still teenagers. But there's no mistaking that something has changed. Then we have another Dave Cockrum cover. This is number 11. Fan favorite characters here, but no marquee. None of them marquee for the Legion. And then number 12, which, if I remember correctly, is the last one. And here we have a little bit of a cost-saving measure on the cover, because this is Mike Grell. But this is clearly, just a cut and paste job from that original Treasury edition eons ago. And this takes us even more forward in time. Notice Karate Kid, one of the Legion members, got his own series. Some of those issues are in here. It's and that wraps things up. I do not believe that the archive editions went to 13. I could be wrong. If they did, God knows how much that number 13 volume is. And that proved to DC Comics that you could make money reprinting the Legion. Now, while they were doing that, here, let me get my props ready here. While they were doing that, they were still coming forward with new Legion issues. But they were also regularly coming up with ideas to reprint, like these hardcovers, DC Comics Classics Library. One of the first ones they did when they were relaunching this, they did not continue this. They did just a few titles in the Classics Library. And one of the first ones they chose to relaunch it was something that, again, they knew would sell out. Not just sell, but sell out. And this is The Life and Death of Pharaoh Lad, that character that we saw earlier, who is one of the only characters in the history of the Legion lore who is explicitly described as a mutant. And he also sacrifices his life. He dies in Legion continuity. And this tells you, this gives you reprints of all the issues where he's introduced, the issues where he fights alongside the Legion, and the issue where he dies. And also the issue where he seems to come back. Let me see if they give us the cover for that. That would be great. Yes. where the ghost of Pharaoh Lad seems to return. They give us all of that. They leave out for this thing Pharaoh Lad's perhaps most famous modern occurrence in DC Comics. But still, we give us this. But they're also giving us the Legion itself. And they're coming forward with all sorts. Oh my God, there's so many examples. There's Legion's Secret Origin here. This is a very modern retelling of the origin of the Legion. We have reprints from the 1990s of various Legion runs, various Legion concepts. These things continue. We have a Superboy in the Legion of Superheroes, but when you dig into these issues, it's not actually Superman when he was a boy. It's the clone Superboy brought forward in time and deciding to wear Superman's costume. Can't totally object with covers like this, but still, it wasn't the same. And also, it signaled the weird internal politics of what DC Comics has done for the last 40 years with the idea of Superboy. They still have a Superboy. In fact, right now, the character called Superboy in DC continuity is the surly leather jacket wearing clone who does not have Kryptonian superpowers. They made a point of not calling Clark Kent's super gay teenage son Superboy because they wanted to call him Superman so that their blue-haired ideological activists could say on Twitter, "We made Superman gay." Clark Kent is not gay, but they wanted to have the name so that they could say that. That's also why they aged up the character. We won't go on a digression here about what that says about a group of people who resist the idea that they are child predators. We'll resist the urge to go on that digression. That is the subject for another video on a different channel. Instead, the Legion just keeps reappearing. And they have all sorts of new eras, some of which produce masterpieces of their own, including this one, probably the most famous one of all, the Great Darkness saga, in which Keith Giffen and Paul Levitz, one of the great writers of Legion of Superheroes, Paul Levitz and Jim Shooter. What's the matter, Crypto? You want to fly over here? Come on, you could do it. Come on, you could do it. There you go. In the Great Darkness saga, they imagined, well, what if the totally lame, utterly ridiculous Jack Kirby created supervillain from the 20th century, Darkseid, what if he were still around in the 30th century? What if he decided to regain power and strike at the superheroes of the 30th century? And despite the fact that Darkseid is one of the lamest of Jack Kirby's long line of lame creations, the story works really well. Where he faces the Legion, and it has been reprinted many times. This is an earlier reprint, but there have been later ones. And there were also extremely complex storylines. Like, for instance, there was a two-pronged storyline that sprang from this story. This is by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, in which the Legion is co-opted by a weird, necrotic, evil force. And this split off into two storylines, one of which a part of the Legion is lost in another part of the galaxy, another part of the universe, and thinks they will never get home, thinks they don't even have a way to get home. Whereas their counterparts at home are facing their own challenges. And this is all great stuff. It came out decades after that original Otto Binder run, but it is great, great stuff. The artwork is far more complex, far more science fiction-y, but still are regular recognizable characters. That didn't always stay true. That didn't always stay true. Sometimes we got great writers returning. Jim Shooter, for instance, returned for some runs on the Legion, the later Legion. And we also got some modern iterations where other splinter groups of the team were lost in the 20th century. That was always a popular thing to do. One of the most popular things to do when you've got a super team that has 30 characters is to split them up. That was one of the core appeals of that Mordru the Merciless story, where 4 Legionnaires flee from Mordru to Superboy's hometown of 20th century Smallville and think they might have to live there for a long time and learn the ways and whatnot. That was very popular with fans because it allowed you to drill down on the characters of those 4. They weren't lost in the crowd. And DC would often do that. Legion Lost was a New 52 version of that, where a group of characters, a group of Legionnaires is lost in the 20th century. You had New 52 relaunches of the Legion of Superheroes itself with extremely ornate science fiction cover art that was just... the science fiction artwork on the inside that was just amazing. Just incredibly good. Again, these characters aren't specifically teenagers anymore. But, like for instance, that is Ultra Boy. That is a full-grown young man. That's not a teenager at all. But these issues still had really neat moments in them. Almost any incarnation of the Legion will give you really great moments. Like, for instance, when this huge module thing crashes to the ground, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, Brainiac 5, the resident expository dump and also the genius of the Legion, says that, well, there is a solution to the problem here, but it depends on Ultra Boy. And that depends on whether or not Ultra Boy simply has the physical strength necessary to throw the thing into orbit. And he says to him, a more permanent solution is required, and perhaps you are strong enough to provide it. And Ultra Boy says, haven't found my limit yet, little guy. Terrific stuff. That's terrific stuff. It hasn't been carried forward in any kind of live media. There was, some of you may be aware of the cartoon version of the Legion of Superheroes, which did some things right. I was saying for the better part of 70 years that Bouncing Boy, whose ability is to expand his body into a beach ball shape and bounce off things, I was saying for the better part of 70 years that he was much more powerful than people give him credit. That bouncing version of himself must be invulnerable. And that means it could do real damage. He's basically a human wrecking ball. And in the cartoon of the Legion of Superheroes, they acknowledge that Bouncing Boy is a formidable Legion. He's not just a joke. But they also made Brainiac 5 into a robot. Brainiac 5 is not a robot. But we'll get to the plastic version. Because naturally, as I've mentioned before in many, many comic book videos, ideological rot set in to both Marvel and DC. DC is the home of Legion of Superheroes. And that rot was largely forbidden with the absolutely archetypal money cows for DC. So, although the writers of DC Comics were busily saying that every character in their entire stable is gay, they were told, not by their editors, these ponytail-wearing soy boys, they were told by the money people from New York. People who, you say no, you don't leave the room with a job. They were told by... they were told by those people, Superman's not gay. Batman's not gay. So, they worked really hard to get one of Batman's Robins to be gay, even though in canon he's not. They worked really hard to take Superman's young boy son, his 8-year-old son, and quickly age him up to make him gay and call him Superman. They just couldn't do it with the canonical characters themselves. Unfortunately, this was not true for the Legion. By that point, by the time the companies both became ideologically captured, the Legion had an ongoing series that did well in quite some time, and only the real Legion fans cared about it, which made it a prime target for all of the Twitter politicking in the world, which happened to it with Brian Michael Bendis. Did the Legion in a relaunch in which all the characters are gay, in which all the characters are race and gender swapped, in which all the characters have two mommies. It was... I went into it with hope, because there's nothing I would like better than an ongoing Legion comic that was good. I went into it with hope, and I should have known better. And I was immediately disappointed. Let me show you. This collection of freakazoids is the Legion of Superheroes. It's just utterly ridiculous. And I have the volume, but I only read it in scorn. But while DC was doing that, while they were completely destroying their own legacy, they were continuing with reprint volumes. Here's 1,000 Years of the Future. Again, with a takeoff of this cover, this iconic Rich Buck or Dave Cock or Mike Grell cover. But it takes you through a huge amount of Legion reprints, just like those earlier hardcover editions did. And in addition to that, DC, of course, came out with omnibus editions, which I can't show you because I don't have them. Even for my beloved Legion of Superheroes, they aren't readable. They aren't usable. They can go on a shelf, sure, but only my dog sees my shelf. So it's not doing me any good to have them there. I have had them. I've had them all. But they're not usable. You can't take them down off the shelf and comfortably read them anywhere. Unless you have a medieval-style wooden lectern in your house, you can't comfortably read them. So one by one, I got rid of them all and just got over the feeling of disloyalty involved in that. The DC Comics came out with huge Michael K. Vaughan style $120 hardcover omnibus editions of all of these old archive editions. Just fewer of them. 3 of them so far, I think. And also, they finally, after years and years of fans lobbying, including one particular fan from Boston, years and years of fans lobbying, they finally came out with gigantic, and we're talking 2,000-page omnibus editions of another run on the Legion of Superheroes that it took huge liberties with the original continuity, with the original idea, and yet I loved it. And that's this. That's Keith Giffen's 5 Years Later saga that he did with Tom and Mary Bierbaum, where he imagines the Legion of Superheroes 5 years later. So they're definitely not teenagers anymore. And the world has changed. They are adults who are a little bit embarrassed of their Legion past. Here we have an older son boy, for instance, being interviewed for TV. They're showing all these black and white clips of him fighting Legion villains. And he says, I can't believe you dug out that old video. This is embarrassing. And this, you would think that I would hate this, but because it's all grim-darked up. But the Legion of Superheroes 5 Years Later saga is great. It's belongs on the same shelf as the Great Darkness saga as a perfect example of a great Legion run. Same thing with the one I was talking about that group of Legionnaires lost on the other side of the universe. This Legion Lost is amazing. It is an incredible, incredible realization of the concept of the Legion. It's not the whole Legion, but oh my God, what a story this is, and such great artwork all throughout. It just amazing artwork all throughout. Just incredible stuff. Not anything like the original runs, of course, but still incredible stuff. And well, the Twitter version of the Legion didn't sell. Legion fans like myself flocked to it in the hopes that there would be something we could cling to, and instead, every issue was telling us that we were bigots. Every issue was telling us that we were racist and sexist. Every issue was mucking around with characters who have now 60 years of continuity. You don't get to muck around with them. They're not yours. You don't get to change them. You don't get to fundamentally alter the whole idea of what, and of course, all the Twitter alterations of all of these original IPs always have one end goal. It's true that in Star Wars Acolyte, we got to the end goal a lot faster than usual, which led to its cancellation, but the end goal is always the same. The people who have hijacked these IPs don't care about them. What they want is to show you not only that your grandparents were bad people, but that there's no real fundamental difference between good and evil. And Brian Michael Bendis' Legion eventually tended towards that, where the good guys will do horrible things and the bad guys will be misunderstood. The Acolyte went whole hog on that right away, and fans, of course, rebelled. Unless you yourself are evil, you are going to rebel at a show that says that Jedi and Sith are basically the same thing. Same thing with comic books, except that the companies involved have so little in the way of profit that they're not really motivated to change much. But that Legion comic, fans, old-time fans of the Legion of Superheroes went there and saw, I don't know, none of them are straight. Bouncing Boy is no longer about expanding to beach ball size and slamming bad guys. Instead, he's about body positivity. Dream Girl is naked. Nobody seems to care, etc., 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 etc. Right down the line. And it isn't the real Superboy either. It's the gay Superboy, the aged-up gay son of Superman. So it stopped selling, and so it went away, and there is no Legion comic now, and I'm grateful for that. As I say on this channel all the time, I don't want in the 2020s, I don't want anything that I love to be remade or relaunched. I don't want anyone to touch it. I don't want them to even think about relaunching, for instance, a comic book of Superman when he was a boy. Forever, I dreamt of DC doing that. Now I dread it. I wouldn't want them to do it at all. And I don't want them to relaunch the Legion. Just don't touch it. Instead, do for the Legion just what you should. Just keep reprinting it. Keep reprinting these older issues that aren't ideologically warped, that aren't trying to make any stupid ideological points. There are quite a few of these, and more on the way. Just keep reissuing these. Just keep doing these hardcovers. And I and other Legion fans will be happy. We won't be as happy as we would be if you gave us the real Legion of Superheroes in really fantastic issues. We would sell those out. Right now, your average Batman comic sells 2,000 copies, and that's to stores. It sells a lot fewer than that to people who are actually buying it at the stands, but store buys are about 2,000 copies for Batman, who, before these things were ideologically captured, sold 70,000 comics. Well, you put out a good issue, a good run on the Legion of Superheroes, Legion fans will be the first ones to come back, forget what you've done to everything else they love, and buy that issue. Not 2,000, not 20,000, but 200,000. DC won't do it. So I'm glad that they don't do anything. The Legion right now does not have an ongoing comic, and I don't want them to. But the reprints continue. In addition to all of these things, in addition to the omnibus editions that I'm not showing you, there's also a series coming up. I think it's called DC's Finest. And I think they're launching that this winter and then in the spring of next year. And I believe that one of the first volumes in that run will be a Legion volume. Again, because the powers that be, the money people at DC Comics know, well, we don't know what it is with these people. They're obviously not on the right side of history. But when we put out a Legion comic of some kind, any kind of Legion reprint, they buy it. All. They buy all of it instantly. So we'll do that in this first run to help launch this DC's Finest or something, or whatever it's called like that. The issue that they're doing is Zap Goes the Legion. And it is reprinting issues that have been reprinted a million times before. In these volumes I've shown you, we've seen it 6 times. The introduction of the character of Timberwolf is reprinted in Zap Goes the Legion. Depending on what kind of new stuff it very, very much does not have a new cover. The classic cover here I'm not showing you DC Comics Showcase editions. Forever and ever they had, before they came out with these hardcover color reprint volumes, and now everybody has color reprint volumes. Marvel and DC came out with runs of paperback cheap newsprint reprint volumes that were a lot of people's gateway to a lot of these older issues. A lot of them weren't available in any other way. They were called Showcase editions for DC. And they brought out a whole shelf of Legion Showcase editions, and I got them all, and got rid of them all eventually because I realized these things don't hold up. They're not as solid as good solid hardcovers are. So I revisit the Legion often. Now maybe these hardcovers less often. Now that I have the electronic versions, I don't really need to revisit these old things quite as much anymore, except for nostalgia's sake. But the reprints here of that introduction of Lone Wolf, of Timberwolf, also have the same cover. They just use the same cover. The Showcase edition used the same cover. It's a great cover. It's a Nick Cardy cover. And I think that's the cover of Zap Goes the Legion. And if that's true, if they're not commissioning even a new cover for these things, even though I think they're charging $60, then they probably don't have any original stuff on the inside either. It's probably literally just reprints that I already have, with nothing added, not even a prose introduction. I'll have to dig deeper into it, but if that turns out to be true for Zap Goes the Legion, then probably I will break with the trend that I've been describing in this incredibly long video and just simply not buy it. I'll have to wait for something new or original. More volumes reprinting Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, more volumes reprinting later Legion issues. Like, for instance, there's a volume after this. This is Before the Darkness. That's referring to the Great Darkness saga. I think there's one after this that I don't actually have that I need to get, and I think there's one more of those in the works. But that's the sad state. That's the tragedy that we end on, is that I don't get to end here on extolling the virtues of the latest DC Comics ongoing Adventure Comics or Legion of Superhero comics. If Legion were appearing in 2 simultaneous issues, Adventure and Legion, and both were done really well, both of them would sell enough to float all of the DC Comics line. That would happen. Those Legion fans are still there. They would come back for a well-done Legion issue. The problem is that they've been burned, and they now know what they can expect, which is this kind of crap. They can expect this kind of crap. Where Cosmic Boy, for instance, who's alien, is now Oriental. They know that they can expect that, and I doubt that that will change. I doubt that anything at DC Comics could change that. So maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe they realize that, Mark Waid's World's Finest is outselling anything they have, and that there's a reason for that, and it's not Mark Waid. Maybe they realize that and have a change of heart. I doubt it. What would be necessary first at Marvel and DC is exactly what I've described a number of times, which is not a company directive. That is not good enough for CB Sapolsky or whoever to say, well, we're going to stop with all of this virtue signaling, posturing. We're going to stop with all the Twitter politics, and also none of you are allowed on Twitter anymore. Instead, we're going to tell these great stories. We're going to involve people emotionally, and we're going to stick to canon. We're going to honor canonical characters. You want to come up with a character who has two mommies? Create one. And if the fans love it, if you make the fans love it, well, then fine. Then you've added to the continuity. We're not going to change any of the settled continuity of the Legion. That's not enough. That kind of a directive, you would think, would fix things, but it wouldn't. As I've said many, many times before, when it comes to these IP thieves, you need to walk them out of the building. You need to fire all of them and walk them out of the building. You need to blacklist them from the entire industry, or they will just coagulate somewhere else and continue with what they're doing. So they need to be gone completely, and there's no chance that's going to happen. So I don't think there'll ever be an ongoing Legion of Superheroes comic anymore, and I would shun it if there were. So we have a little bit of a downer note to end on, but I can recover the end of the video by saying that Zap Goes the Legion and these ongoing hardcover editions are a good sign. There's plenty of Legion adventures, plenty of ways to repackage this thing. Eventually you will run out. Sure, eventually you will have as much Legion as you can have. But there's a long way to go. There's a lot of great stuff to commemorate and maybe get people to write introductions, maybe new covers, little add-ons like that. Also, DC Comics has these new compendium volumes. 1,200 pages in paperback, in color. I have the one for Nightwing. I don't think there's one planned for the Legion, but what a feast it would be if there were. It would sell out. It would sell out. The Robin one and the Nightwing one did not. Even though they're Batman adjacent, they did not sell out. And I think it's safe to say that Animal Man won't sell out. But the Legion would. So maybe DC will do that. I would be up for that. I would definitely be up for that. That's not a big, heavy omnibus edition. But there you go. That is my equivalent of Mike's Superman video and Jim's Batman video. And I want to finish. This went on way too long. Get me talking about the Legion, and it will. I want to finish with two things. One, of course, is a thready, embattled, slightly reedy, long live the Legion. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. The company that produces the Legion of Superheroes has been completely ideologically captured. So a team of happy-go-lucky teenagers fighting injustice in the 30th century? No, they're not going to produce such a thing. Not a chance. And, I mean, them going back in time to snatch Superboy and bring him forward 1,000 years to be their leader and their inspiration. Oh, God. White Messiah complex, any? Lost. Just lost. The industry is lost. But the reprints at least signal a time when that wasn't true, when the industry wasn't lost, when it listened to its fans and served their own interests. That's one thing, is a thready, embattled, long live the Legion. And the other thing is a call to the rest of you. Surely out there, listening to this video, is somebody who has a huge fandom for some other thing. Superman, Batman, and the Legion have now been covered, but what else? What about Spider-Man? What about the Fantastic Four? Feel free, if you're watching this video, BookTube is not actually broken into the ranks of ComicsTube. They are insular as the Fantasy Tubers, so they don't know that we exist. They don't know that there are longtime comic book fans out here on BookTube. That's a shame, because not only can we match them with enthusiasm, but at least with some of us, myself included, we can certainly match or exceed them in knowledge and experience. I've been involved in buying superhero comic books for a very, very, very long time. Of course, not as long as that great-grandfather buying Adventure Comics in 1958, but still, who's alive that's still that old? But they don't know about us. But those of you who are watching, if you have a BookTube channel and you have a whole collection of Wonder Woman stuff, or Lobo, or The Flash, now's the time to make the video. The three cool kids have already done it. Michael K. Vaughan, Jim, Mystery and Mayhem, and yours truly. Now it's your turn. So anyway, I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.